I always say, if you really have the creative affliction, because that's what it is, and you want to be a novelist, a songwriter, a filmmaker, and there's no other option for you, you better focus and you better commit. It ain't no joke. Whether it's in front of 20,000 people or 20 people, you need to live for it. And for me, all those years when I was totally unsuccessful performing for 10 people a night, 10 hostile people, I loved it.
Welcome to the Creative Jungle Podcast, where we explore the creative process and fascinating people who have creative courage. Here are your hosts, Artie and Justin.
Welcome to the Creative Jungle Podcast. I am Artie Gold. This is Justin Andrews.
Hello, what's up?
How you doing,
That's
Justin?
a cool catchphrase.
You know, we also have our lead editor here today, Justin Roy Power, because Roy, he's been working on one of his passion projects for a while with a very special musician and band we've all grown to admire, not just for his great music and creative flair, but frankly, his band Low Cut Connie has kind of become our unofficial soundtrack for Animus Studios. Recently named one of the Pandemic Persons of the Year by New Yorker for his ongoing efforts to raise spirits during the COVID-19 pandemic. Adam, it's a great pleasure and honor to welcome you, the Low Cut Connie, to our show. And you don't know this because we've never met, but through Roy and through your music and the videos that we've helped and also that I've watched, I got nothing but praise for your creative courage and what's going on in that beautiful mind of yours.
Thank you, Artie. I'm very happy to be here running through this video jungle with you and your pals. I've enjoyed working with you folks, even though we've not met face to face before. And I'm looking forward to talking about videos because even though I'm a musician, and that's what I'm primarily known for, making videos and visual work is what I really love to do.
Yeah. How did, we'll get to the video real quick, but before we start, like the creative process for your music, does it start with music or the words or the visual? Like what is that whole creative process for you?
Oh, well, all of the above, but I'm usually a music first person. I play piano and that's where I do most of my musicianing. And sometimes a tune comes into my head. Sometimes a phrase comes into my head. Sometimes I wake up and it's just all there together. But most often, Artie, without getting too deep into it, it's like baking. And sometimes you're doing something that's like a quick 30-minute batch of cookies. And sometimes it's like overnight. And sometimes it's something that's got to stay in the oven for years. And there are a lot of songs that I've made. Like on our newest record, Private Lives, there were songs that I wrote all in one sitting. And then there are songs that go back 15 plus years and they weren't ready yet. And then I took them out of the oven and they were ready 15 years later.
And when you're like done with a song and it's come together and it feels good, do you instantly get the image in your head that makes it a video in your mind? Or do you take a lot of time to start thinking about like, how do I want this to visually look to somebody so they can understand the words that are coming out of my mouth?
Well, I don't feel like a song is ready to go unless it has a sort of three-dimensional quality to it and it's already conjuring a visual landscape. I want a piece of music, a recording or a performance, live performance or recorded performance, to give you images. I want you to feel some sort of place that you're going to. And in some cases, I don't want to tamper with that by adding a video, okay? But in other cases, I want to expand it by adding a video. For instance, we did 6 or 7 music videos so far for the Private Lives album. And the very first one I put out was a song called Look What They Did. And my good pal, Alex Robleski, is a photojournalist. He lives in Washington, D.C., and he photographs. He has White House credentials. So he shoots at the White House. He shoots at the Supreme Court. He shoots in the Capitol. But in his spare time, he goes to conflict zones. And he's a fan of the band, and he sent me images that he shot in Ferguson and in Puerto Rico after the hurricane, in FEMA trailers in South Florida after the hurricane. And he said, if there's ever a project that you'd like to collaborate on. And I had written this very, very topical, ripped out of the headlines song about Atlantic City in New Jersey. And so I knew that showing very documentary style images of the city I was singing about would only expand the world of the song. And so Alex and I went to Atlantic City for 2 days and we shot this video. That was a case where I knew that the video would just make the song bigger and better and more three-dimensional. But there's other cases already where I avoid making a video because I feel like the song is already taking you somewhere and I don't want to spoil the images that it's putting into your mind.
Yeah, no, and Roy, I remember when you guys came back from your Philly trip the first time around for that video. I remember laughing because like we pride ourselves on, I mean, everybody in this industry is like, it has to be 8K, 12K, 20K, everything's got to look super, super crisp. And I remember when he was editing it, I'm like, did you shoot this on a VHS? I love it. And he was like, nope, this is Adam's vision. This is the way he wanted to go. And I'm like, man, that is spectacular. And I know, Roy, talk to me about that experience, because that was a different experience from what we usually edit, correct?
Yeah, that's a pretty good experience there. And I always think about that project, Adam, kind of thinking about your directing itself, right? So, I mean, you were pretty specific with what you wanted while editing that, while also being open-ended enough to kind of like give me the creative freedom to keep working on it and keep building it in different ways. So, I mean, I could talk a lot about on-set production, but because I'm more familiar with the post on that and spent more time with that, could you kind of talk about that process a little bit and just like how you create with other people with specificity versus open-endedness?
Yeah, you're talking specifically about the video for Dirty Water, I think.
Yeah.
Dirty Water is a song off of my Dirty Pictures Part 1 album. I'm very practical with these things, Roy. Like, I know I have this many hours, and I have to look at the landscape and say, what do I have at my disposal? And because I'm a totally independent artist, I run my own label, I never got signed. We're not spending somebody else's money, we're spending our own money. And so all of my videos have to be sort of manageable in terms of scope, and they often have to be done quickly. And the main thing is to cast talented people who are well cast in their roles behind the camera, on camera, in post-production. I just like to work with really talented people, but we have to work quick, just like making an independent film. And so when you are limited in terms of time and space and resources, it's challenging, but also liberating, because it's like working on assignment. Different people react to working on assignment differently. I in some ways like working on assignment. It's like saying to somebody, you have to create something in 6 hours. You can only use this many people. You only have these lights to work with. And in the case of Dirty Water, we had one location. And to make one location work for a 3.5 to 4 minute video and not have it be terribly boring, you need to really focus on making the performances and the people who are on camera do really compelling things that can create a sort of 4-minute arc to it. And then also visually, in terms of lighting and the quality of the shots, they can't all be uniform. So we have to try to tease out the most we can from a very simple setup, which you guys did a beautiful job of doing. I've worked on videos where we had weeks. I've worked on videos where we had many locations and very variable lighting setups. But to be honest with you, I really like the little blitz videos where we have a very simple setup, and then it becomes, how can we put our heads together and make something magical happen quickly? It doesn't always work. Sometimes the chemistry isn't there, but if you get better and better, I get better and better at casting the roles, if that makes sense.
How do you go to sit down and not just reinvent the wheel? I think Tough Cookies is a great example of kind of like just being thrown into something completely new and reinventing. So how do you go about like reinventing and fearlessly doing it?
Sure. Well, good question. I think, and I've said this on a few recent interviews that were totally unrelated. Like I did an interview with a psychologist for Psychology Today that was all about the psychology of performance. And it's very clear to me that over the years, as a performer, I'm not striving to expand and be new things. I'm actually going through a process of shedding layers that are, not useful to me. So basically, this is how I see it. I think we grow up in society, and society puts, as we go through adolescence, we go through these things where society puts certain limitations on us. And that has to do with how you're supposed to act in polite society, what gender is supposed to be, what race is supposed to be, what class, and just how you're supposed to be and behave and be perceived. And those things are very limiting. It's how our society runs, for better or for worse. But when you're a performer, you get to shed those things. People say to me, where did the character Low Cut Connie come from? It's not a character. It's a truer version of myself than I can be on the street every day. And so it's freeing up what's already there. From album to album, song to song, video to video, tour to tour, I really just get to be myself more and trust myself more. The process of switching from a touring setting to being in my house, in my underwear, playing songs for Tough Cookies is one in which people are getting to see me be more true to myself. And I think a lot of great artists that I admire as they go through their careers, whether it's music, writing, film, painting, they become truer to themselves. They become more honest. I think of, in music, I don't know why it pops to my mind, but John Lennon, after the Beatles, after he'd done all this great work, the work that he did in the 70s, post-Beatles, was so much closer to the bone in terms of who he really was. I think of Prince, who's a huge performance and writing hero of mine. And every record he made from the time he was a teenager through the 80s into the 90s, he got closer and closer to the element of who he was and who he could be. David Bowie. Patti Smith is somebody who was always sort of digging and trying to be truer to this purity of who she was and wanted to be. And so I really try to just trust myself more and more to just do what I feel and be who I want to be. I don't like to get on stage or get in front of a microphone and sing words that I don't mean. I really want to mean what I say. And so as I age, I try to write more and more things that I will be able to sing and say with conviction for a long time. There are songs that I've written when I was younger that don't resonate with me anymore, and I don't play them. But there are songs that I will never get tired of singing. When I sing Getting Down Here with the People, down with the gospel truth from my song Boozophilia, I feel it every time. And when I sing Private Lives, when I sing my song Stay As Long As You Like, the last song off of Private Lives, I feel like I will be able to relate to that forever. To me, it's like I know I'm done with a piece of music when I can perform it for people and fully inhabit it.
Yeah, I want to hear more about this, like this shedding thing, like this metamorphosis, right? I think like everything you said is really useful for people who aren't musicians, they might not consider themselves a creative person. They might be, like, we work with a lot of corporate clients too, but
yeah, the biggest thing they always say, Justin, is like, I'm not creative. You're the creative ones, right?
Like, what is your process for shedding one of those layers, right? What is your process for, do you go away somewhere once a year and sit down and say, like, I don't like this aspect of myself, I want to change it? Or obviously it's probably a little bit more organic than that. Like, are there milestone moments that you can point at in your life that like push you to just like change something?
Sure.
How do you keep getting closer to, your true self, and then the work ends up being a reflection of that?
Yeah, well, the biggest milestone, and people don't realize this about me, but I can't even count the number of day jobs until I was 35 years old. On another podcast, we could talk about the dozens and dozens of jobs that I did, but it wasn't until the fall of 2015 really the end of 2015 that I quit my last day job, and I was 35. At that point, Low Cut Connie had grown to the point where I was doing it so much, and I was at the crisis point where I either was going to take a leap and do it full time, or it was never going to grow to the degree that I wanted it to. But because I worked in so many different job settings all the way until I was 35, I have a pretty deep appreciation for the front-facing person that I had to be when I was a secretary or a teacher or worked in retail or played music in corporate settings or played music in restaurants, all the things I did versus who I wanted to be and who I really was. And so since 2016, really, over the last 5 years, I get to be myself for a living instead of a thing that I did on the weekends to blow off steam from the rest of my time. It actually switched to I needed to be myself every day. And it's like practice. It's like doing yoga or meditating or boxing or whatever people do with great regularity that they practice, playing an instrument, learning to photograph. You do it and do it and do it, and you get 10,000 plus hours. Well, I already had like 20 or 30,000 hours of performing before I was 35. But then I had to get 10,000 hours of being myself in front of people in a truer way. And so it's just practice, and you gain trust in both your audience and in yourself that you can do it.
Did you notice the way that you were writing songs change during those processes, Adam? Like from 2015 below, when you're performing at, I'm assuming, bar mitzvahs and corporate events, the music coming out of your head is different than 2016, where you're now finding yourself. Did your creative process change? Did the words flow out better, worse, or was there a difference?
Yes, good question. Different. Like anybody, like any artist in any medium, you try on a lot of hats before you know what you're good at or who you are. And so in my 20s, I had a lot of different bands and a lot of different musical projects. And so I was rockabilly guy, then I was punky guy, I was flamboyant Bowie guy, I was country guy, I was Elton John guy, I was Iggy Pop guy, and I tried all these different hats on. And Low Cut Connie, which started when I was 30, was the first musical project where I let a little bit more of myself into it. It was a little closer to the bone. And by the time I hit that 2015, when I was 35 and I took the leap, I realized now everything I do has to be pure. And so there's songs I've written in the last 6 years. Stay As Long As You Like, certainly one of them. Private Lives is one of them. Help Me is another one. Those are just three that come to mind off the recent record. Revolution Rock and Roll, that I never could have written before then, because they're pure. They don't put on any kind of mask. I'm not trying to imitate anybody. I'm not trying to be cool. I'm not trying to be trendy. I'm not trying to sound like anybody else. I'm just trying to say what I feel.
As Adam changes, your fans don't necessarily change. The people that listen to your first album want you to do that album again or something like that. And you might be like, I don't even want to sing any of those songs. Like, I don't write, none of those words connect with me anymore. How do you, as someone who's very close to your fans in your performances, like, I think the pandemic, Tough Cookies is a great example of you getting even closer to your fans and people like us that you've never met me. But like our whole company is like having watch parties for Tough Cookies, right? And like Roy's like hyping it up. I've got my brother messaging me out in Colorado, all excited about hearing Low Cut Connie on the radio. That's all from Roy, like word of mouth. But it's like you develop tons and tons of fans, and then they're picturing you as a thing. How does it jive with like wanting to make fans happy, but knowing like that it might not jive with who you are, and that you have to do something completely different. And you either lose those fans or they love you even more for continuing to stay a path that you're going.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Well, first of all, my first Low Cut Connie album, Get Out the Lotion, I wrote 6 songs, I think, and I'll never get tired of singing Big Thighs, New Jersey, Rio. I have a song on there called Full of Joy that I've started doing again. But I did get tired of singing Shit, Shower, and Shave, which is a song I wrote when I was 19 and doesn't resonate anymore. But no, I am well aware that people are going to get on and off the train with me. Artists that I really look up to, like David Bowie, Prince, James Brown, Tina Turner, they go through different stages and phases, and different records have different looks and sounds and feels and are thinking about different things. And I'm well aware that people are going to get on and off board, but I want the people that listen to my music or come to my shows, I want them to expect that I'm always going to try to do what I feel. And they may not like the new album. I hope they'll check out the next one. And I know I have people that I lost along the way, which is, it's all good. I think I picked up more than I lost. And I will lose more people as I develop what I'm doing. But I don't feel any sort of responsibility to do what I did before. But if I've done a good job, then I will have material that lasts for me. When I sing Revolution Rock and Roll, even though I wrote it 6 years ago, I could sing that song forever.
That leads me into my question. What I was going to ask was going back to creative courage. Is it a blessing or a curse to have stand by your conviction of like what you think something should sound like, what you think it should look like? Has it affected like collaborations? Has it affected, anything that goes? Because when we always talk about creative courage in our company, and we tell everybody, is like, you have to have a little bit of creative courage if you want to stand out, take a chance, you want to do something different, or you can just follow everybody else. You might not even get noticed, right? Is it a blessing or a curse to have that kind of mind where I know you have creative courage because I see it happen in everything you do. So how has that been, and how has that affected your creativity and decisions you've made?
It's a curse in the music world. It's a blessing everywhere else. That's my short answer. By that, I mean, I'm a terrible collaborator with other musicians. Part of that is I have a fairly singular vision of what I do musically and what I want to try. And in order for a good collaboration, in my opinion, you need to balance an equal kind of respect. If Freddie Mercury and David Bowie sing a song together, they both have ultimate respect for each other, and they collaborate together beautifully. They value each other's contributions. I've been in situations musically with people where I was like way lower on the totem pole than the person I was put in a room with, and maybe vice versa, but it's never comfy when the person you're working with doesn't see you as a peer. And in the music industry, I am sort of a cult artist. And so I am rarely allowed into situations where I am considered a peer, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
What's funny about that is I've met Elton John, and he's been such a huge supporter, and he's like, we should collaborate sometime. And it's funny that I could meet somebody like that, and that respect is there. But in the very social media driven, ego driven, competitive world of the music business, I'm often meeting artists who say they want to collaborate or whatever, but we're never on equal footing. However, outside of the music business, when I work with filmmakers, podcasts, videos, live, comedians, dancers, it's just beautiful, and the flow is there. I respect your talent, you respect mine, and then now let's go somewhere crazy. And it's funny, Artie, the first thing I thought when you asked me that question is, about 6 months ago, I said to somebody as a joke, I feel like during the pandemic, I left the music business And now I just work in the entertainment business, and it's such a good feeling.
But I think like what you're describing isn't just like music industry, right? Like every industry, there's some imposter syndrome. So a lot of people have where you're in a scenario where you feel like you can't compete because you're not there yet. You haven't crossed that gap to figure out how to be that good yet. And obviously that's the case in every industry. Perpetuating the belief that you're not good enough doesn't get you ahead. Not that it means that you have to subscribe to like winning a Grammy in the music world or whatever people deem as being successful. Like, how have you been able to bridge that gap internally for yourself, and where has that taken you?
I've got imposter syndrome as bad as anybody. I end up doing things, and later I look back and I say, who was that? You know, it's like I'm on the ceiling looking down at myself, and I've done some really outrageous things on stage and in my career, and I could never do them in the light of day. And I'm always thinking, who the hell was that? And it was a really amazing moment in 2016 when I met President Obama, who had put my song on his playlist. And I got invited to the White House to meet him, and he talked to me about Low Cut Connie. Walking out of there, that was one of the first moments I had where I actually felt, wow, I'm doing something. It's somebody's, somebody thinks it's worth it. But you have to understand, to be an artist for a career, you have to work, you have to know the business, you have to work the business part. And the music business gave me nothing. It had never given me anything. I've been turned down by almost every label, indie, small or large. I started my own music label out of desperation. Like, I did want to get signed. I wanted a great manager, and it took many years. I wanted a booking agent, and I couldn't get one until 2016. I wanted a great publicist, and it took 6 years. By the time some of these things came, I had sort of mentally realized that the business was never going to give me a break. So I was going to have to make my own luck every step of the way. I guess you get to a certain point, Justin, where you've done enough, you have enough of a track record that in your moments of doubt and your moments of deep imposter syndrome, where you're totally discombobulated about who you are and what you're doing, at least at a certain point now, I can look backwards and say, okay, it's been a decade and I haven't completely botched anything. It hasn't fallen completely apart. It's still growing, and just get back to work.
Yeah, that makes so my favorite song you sing, Adam, is Hollywood. Now Hollywood makes perfect sense to me. When I hear you sing it now, that story really resonates, because it's really our business too. It's like, I always tell people, like, or when students ask me about this business, when I go talk to colleges or high schools, and they'll say, what's this business like? And I always tell them it's like trying to get a credit card, right? When you're 16, they're like, you can't have credit because you don't have credit. Well, how am I supposed to get credit if you don't give me a chance to get credit? So I feel like the business is like kind of wrapped up like that. What's interesting with COVID-19 and the pandemic is how, and you talked about kind of moving from that idea of being a musician into the entertainment world. And let's talk a little bit about Tough Cookies. But before you talk about Tough Cookies, Roy, I know you had introduced us. You know, you call me up every time Tough Cookies is on. And I know from your experience, Roy, I mean, coming from a fan and a friend of the band, but as a fan, like what is Tough Cookies to you? And how would you describe to Adam, like what it's like as a fan to watch Tough Cookies?
Right. Well, that's a pretty good question, actually. I think like I can speak for many that it's kind of meant a lot, because Adam, you released Tough Cookies like the day it started to get really crappy, and the day people realized that this is going to be a long-term thing. And I feel like it became such a part of people's schedules, right? Where it goes and goes and goes. Okay, well, I'll have Tough Cookies on Thursday and Saturday or whatever. I think for a lot of people, it's kind of meaningful. Like, it's a good way to kind of connect with my parents, for example, because they are super fans of Tough Cookies. Like, they'll watch it every day, no question. So it's been a kind of a nice thing, like during this terrible past year, just to kind of have that going. And I'm sure that's the same for many of your subscribers and Patreon people and all that. What have you seen from people and fans where it's been more meaningful than just a way to kill an hour?
It's just like, it's been life-changing for me artistically. I believe that live streaming is the future of the entertainment business. Not everybody agrees with me, but many, many months ago, I realized this was not a stopgap measure during the pandemic. This is like a whole new frontier of media because, back in the 1950s when television first started to get really popular, people, and there were 2 or 3 channels, people were trying to find ways to distinguish that medium from film. What is the format of a TV show? And how can it give people a different experience than they get at a movie theater? And there was a TV cartoon back then with kids where they would put a piece of plastic over the TV and draw on the screen. And the character would say, draw a circle around this, And that kind of educational television for kids was like something totally revolutionary for the medium. Well, I'm having that moment with live streaming because I've figured out that I can create this interactive experience with the viewers at home where they're not only feeling connected to me, but they're connected to each other and they feel like they're part of a crowd, even when they're sitting at home on their couch. And that sort of virtual reality experience of getting that thrill of watching and experiencing something live with a bunch of people shoulder to shoulder. When you're at a comedy show, the great pleasure of watching stand-up comedy is laughing in a crowd. Okay, laughing at home, watching a Eddie Murphy movie is one kind of pleasure. Laughing in a comedy club with 400 other people watching Eddie Murphy on stage, that laughter, it just feels so much bigger. And it's like, it's magic. If we can give people that feeling of magic at home, like this is the future. This is a whole new kind of medium. And there's the possibilities artistically for it are endless. And I don't see it in any way as a competition or even a supplement to touring with a band. It's like a totally different project. I'm going to keep it going in one way or another, even when I'm on the road. And Roy, it's deepened my relationship with the fans because I really legitimately, sincerely feel like we got each other through this past year. This week, March 19th, is the 1-year anniversary of Tough Cookies. I'm going to do episode 83 or 84. And I've done all these supplementary episodes private. So I've done 120 something shows over the last year with big audiences. We've all gotten to be buddies. People comment, I lost my good friend this morning. I need a lot of support. And I sing something to hopefully make them feel, as I say, give me an hour of your time to change your frame of mind. And that emotional connection that they have with me and with each other is like profound. And I never, ever want to go back to any kind of performances that don't create emotional connection, if that makes sense.
Does the creative process for Tough Cookies, well, first of all, is there a big creative process, or is it more of an organic thing that happens? You say, here's a topic, here's what I want to do. Or do you give it a lot of thought? Because that's a lot of mental energy, right? You're talking about 100 shows in a very short amount of time. It's like running your own TV network at that point, right? So
it is.
What's that creative strain for you?
Well, to answer your question, 80%, I will say there is no creative process. You're watching the creative process. The show is 100% live and 100% unscripted. And even the tech aspect of it, George, who produces the show, he sits in the room with me. He has no idea what we're going to do. I have no idea what I'm going to do. And so he's reacting on the tech side as on the fly. And that's part of the thrill of the whole thing. The one aspect of it, though, that does require preparation or some sort of process is I've basically become a talk show host as well. I've interviewed over 40 guests. I have, done this oral history of Sly and the Family Stone for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, where we created this whole show after I interviewed 6 members of the band. And I'm also like a newsman. I'm reflecting the events of the day because I want to speak directly to the moment of what people are feeling that moment. So I do need to keep up on the news. And I also need to do a lot of research on these guests that I speak to. But outside of that, 90% of it is just, it's wild. It's the most without a net performances that I've ever done.
So curious of like how this last year has played out for you and your ability to be creative, being in this vacuum, being in this, this lost year. It's a weird year that I've looked at myself in this little Zoom window more than ever. And it can really start to drain on you. And I could see it going both ways, where it can really taint your creativity. It can taint that ability to shed layers of yourself, or it can enhance them.
It wasn't lost for me. I had like artistically the best year I ever had because it gave me a real sense of purpose. I've read a lot of books lately about art during the Depression and the war years. And it's funny, there was so much sense of purpose in the country and in the world. And art was part of that, from the WPA visual art initiatives all over the country to USO tours during the war. There was just purpose to everything. And then in the 1950s, especially in music, there was this just explosion of creativity in rhythm and blues and rock and roll and soul music. And basically the creation of the music industry that we know happened in that era. So for me, these times of crises have been given me a real sense of purpose, and I feel more creative than ever. We're about to record a new album, and we have a Tough Cookies compilation album that we're about to announce for this year. Surprise. And hopefully we get back out on the road. But I've really enjoyed clocking in hours every day, just going into my music room, and I have a job to do. I have to put together a show for that night. Like right now, Will is on his way over, and we're going to play some music because we got 2 shows, Thursday and Friday. So it's Thursday and Saturday. And there's something about the rigor of just putting the time in every day to the thing that you want to be good at.
So before we move on to our last segment, which is really quick, I just want to, if you could just reflect and give people out there advice on being creative, staying creative, and maybe even the creative process. What would you tell the young minds out there about keeping your brain fresh and developing that creative process, or in your case, finding yourself and shedding those layers to find yourself?
Well, I'm a realist. I'm not an optimist or a pessimist. People think I'm an optimist because I try to make people feel positive, but by nature, I'm a realist. And I think that for me to have a career in art, it felt like an affliction. I wished that I could have been satisfied doing something else. I told you I had a lot of other jobs. Trying to make a living and have a life in art 7 days a week, it ain't no joke. So to the younger folks, I always say, if you really have the creative affliction, because that's what it is, if it keeps you up at night, if it wakes you up in the morning, you're always thinking about something and making something, and there's a song or a video or a photograph or a dance or a novel in your head at all times, and you can't get rid of it, and you got no choice, then first of all, commit. People say to me, if my teenager wants to be in a band or as a rapper, I want them to have fun and just be a kid. How much time should we devote? I would say, how much time would you devote if they were a basketball player and they wanted to be in the NBA? I mean, that's a 1 in 5 million chance that they're going to make the NBA. And you would focus all your energy, health-wise, education-wise, training-wise, practice-wise, to achieving that goal. And even then, there's no guarantee. So if you have that creative affliction, you want to be a novelist, a songwriter, a filmmaker, and there's no other option for you, you better focus and you better commit. That's number one. And number two, there ain't no guarantees. So it might take 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, and it may never happen. And so in that case, a deep, abiding love for the thing that you do is so important. Somebody once said to me that famous expression, a life in the theater is a very good life. So if you're an actor and you want to be on stage and perform in theater, you must love it. I mean, you really have to live for it, and live for doing a black box theater show for 20 people. Whether it's in front of 20,000 people or 20 people, you need to live for it. And for me, all those years when I was totally unsuccessful performing for 10 people a night, 10 hostile people, I loved it.
Yeah.
I really did. I ate it up. And so I encouraged young artists to really like commit to a life in the theater, as they say.
I was just actually listening to a podcast. It was with the Russo brothers, the directors for Marvel, Arrested Development and Community. And they were saying a story. They had run into Steven Soderbergh. And at the time, Steven Soderbergh was having trouble selling his movie or getting anybody to finance him. So he kind of, I think the word would be like, sold out to a lesser type of movie that he would make. And the Russo brothers were like, why would you do that? And he was like, listen, gentlemen, he said, it's called show business for a reason. If you can't embrace the business part, then get out of the show part and go write a book or do something easier. But you have to have that balance of what the business part is in order to explore the other side of it. So
sure. You know, Artie, that you know, a director I love is Cuarón. You know Cuarón? He made that Roma 2 years ago. And he flip-flops. You know, he does a really commercial Hollywood film, and then he does a beautiful independent film, and then he does a big budget Hollywood film, and then he flip-flops, and they're all good. But he could never have gotten to the point where he could make something like Roma had he not done Harry Potter or Great Expectations, or these films that he's worked on. And I get it. And there are a lot of great filmmakers and artists through history that find a way to do both things and do them well.
Martin Scorsese talks about that a lot. Who's the most legendary director of all time. He has to make Wolf of Wall Street now to make The Irishman or Silence, you know, and he's talking about that one for you, one for them for his entire career. And there's really no end to that struggle from what it seems.
Well, because in entertainment, you're only as good as your last thing that you did. So you have to prove it over and over and over again.
It's time for the bonus features.
We usually end our podcast like the old DVDs when people were doing DVDs with a bonus feature, Adam, where we ask you silly, random questions that you don't have to answer, but they're usually pretty easy that you would. So on to our bonus features. And I know you're a huge Prince fan, and I may know the answer to this, but do you have a favorite Prince song? What's your go-to Prince song?
Song. Oh my God. I thought you were going to say album, because song, that ain't right. Little Red Corvette. It's a perfect song.
Oh, nice. Mine is Diamonds and Pearls. I don't know why, but I sing that all the time.
Great.
What's your favorite concert film? Because we've talked about that a little bit before.
Concert film? Oh God. Again, it's so hard. There's so many. I did watch Stop Making Sense like only a month ago, and that's a masterpiece. You know, just for Jonathan Demme, right?
Yep.
He just really like nailed capturing a live performance. You know, soup to nuts. You really, really feel like you're there, which is not always the case. I really like it, but also I just saw a lesser known movie. Grace Jones has a film. It's called Blood, Light, and Bougie, and it's from about 2 or 3 years ago. It's a concert film with some tour footage, and they did a beautiful job of capturing her live concerts.
Yeah, she was a force back in the day.
I'll have to look into that.
So I know you talked about holding down the fort before you became full-time Low Cut Connie. What was the craziest job that you had? If you like to pick the one job out of the hundreds of jobs, what was the one that sticks out of your mind that you went, why was I doing that? That's crazy.
Oh God. I was a secretary in a doctor's office. Um,
I don't know why that made me laugh.
yeah, I was a secretary in a doctor's office for like over 2 years. And what's funny about that is I was like the worst secretary ever.
I think that's why everyone laughs, right? Like that, I laugh too, because that's exactly what I was imagining.
Zero skills. I'm not organized. I'm not good with technology and computers. I'm not good with taking orders. It was just like I was so bad at the job, but they must have been so desperate. They kept me on.
I can imagine those conversations behind closed doors where like, we got to get rid of Adam. They're like, we don't know how to talk to him. And
Actually, that was one job where I didn't get fired. I got fired a lot. What happened in that job is they said the office manager quit. And they said, congratulations, we want to make you the office manager. And that was when I really had a crisis of conscience. I was like, I got to get the fuck out of here. Like, I was a file clerk at Mount Sinai Hospital, and they thought I was a genius. They thought I was the greatest file clerk, and they wanted to, get me unionized and get me a big raise and get me full time. And I was just like, I just know the alphabet.
Very last bonus feature question, Adam. I know you've had the very honor of meeting certain people in your life. Elton John, President Obama. Who had the dreamier eyes?
Dreamier eyes?
Who looked at you and said, that made you feel like...
You mean Obama versus Elton John?
Yes. Because you met both of them. You looked them right in the eye. Which one gave you that feeling of like...
Okay, Obama has the dreamier eyes, but Elton John has the dreamier eyeglasses. Let me put it that way.
Very nice. Very nice. I really appreciate you being on the show. We probably gave you a lot more pats on the back than you might have expected, but it was all true. I got to tell you, like, we were actually on a production in New York a couple of weeks ago. And when we're setting up all the gear, Andy, our head DP, always plays Low Cut Connie. And I remember the freelancers we hired were like, they went to change the channel. And we were like, what, if you touch that, I will break your finger. And by the end of the day, they were like, who are we listening to? And we told them, and your music just is infectious and really just means a lot to us as a company. So I really appreciate you.
Listen, I appreciate you all. You guys are great. Thank you for the great work. Thanks for having me on the show. Let's keep working together in whatever way we can. And let's all make it through this crazy, crazy year that we've all been through. And maybe, just maybe, we can come out the other side stronger in certain ways, and with a deeper appreciation for each other and for art.
The Creative Jungle podcast is a product of Animus Studios. Explore our creative process at animusstudios.com.